Today's program is about rendering. Rendering is one of the subjects prescribed in the syllabus of the university for the undergraduate students. And before taking up the demonstration further, I would like to make clear the notion about rendering. Rendering literally means presentation of something, presentation of by some artist. It can apply to visual art, it can apply to performing arts. So as such, it is a term with a wider connotation. A musician, while rendering a raga, for example, we use the expression, and we appreciate in that light. A dancer also, while performing, he renders a particular mood through the various mudras of dance, using your limbs, using the facial expressions, using the movements of the eyebrows, the lips, etc. Because the beautiful rendering or rendering of the lips was like this, rendering of the gesticulation or mudras, movements was like this. So in this way, what I want to make it clear, the term has a wider connotation, but when we, the students of visual art, it is specifically in relation to the rendering of visual forms. Now again, so far as our syllabus is concerned, it restricts itself to a particular reference to still life. Though it may have even wider connotations within the field of visual arts. We can take nature, we can use any objects like trees, like plants, like the flowers or the birds, animals or anything. And with the help of their images, we can create a new composition by drawing the essential elements of the form and giving them a new type of presentation through combination, through simplification, through distortion, or even picking up only the elements out of that and restructuring the whole thing like that. So in this particular case, here we are restricting ourselves to the present provision of the syllabus. That is, it is taken with reference to rendering as inspired by the still life. That is the group of certain objects. So I don't have to explain the elements of the still life or its composition. To start with, we have taken a group of objects over here consisting of the flask. We have a plate, a cup, a rectangular object, a box, red box, and the apple in a dark background. This is arranged, I think, keeping in mind the basic principles of a good composition, constituting the basic elements of their whatever form they have, like the circular, the cylindrical, the rectangular, the spherical, like that, and combining them in such an order, so in itself, the group itself presents a good composition. Yes, as I was telling you earlier, that still life is only used to provide you some stimulus to stir up your thoughts, especially about the visual effects of the various objects that are before you, from which we can go to their elements. When we talk of the elements, it may be related to any particular object or a group of objects. In this instance, from the group of still life that is before us, for example, I take the jar, the flask before us. Now, it is a cylindrical object, and there are various components together which create an effect of a jar. Now what we do in rendering, we go to the elements of this particular form. Now in this instance, for example, there is a cylindrical form before us. There is a lid, a round lid before us. It has its width, for example like this. Now I am not presenting the view as it is visible to me. I mean the representational aspect of the objects that are before me. I am more concerned about my transformed perception of this thing with my conscious knowledge about the character of the object and its components. The moment I look at the lid, I know the idea comes to my mind, it is round. It is not necessarily taking the form that is visible to me like an ellipse, showing its width like that. Not necessarily. My mind tells me, just as it happens with a child, when he paints a house and he presents a picture of the house, his mind goes to the interior of the house. He wants to show everything that is not actually visible, but still conscious as he is. The inside, maybe the bed, maybe the table, maybe somebody sitting over there, maybe somebody like that. And he will like to put all those things visible even behind the wall. So this is how sometimes what we perceive through the eyes is one thing. When somebody is painting the still life, they take the representational aspect of it, the arrangement as it is visible, what we may say realistically and naturalistic forms. They analyze its forms, they analyze the colors, they analyze the effects of light and shade, they analyze the colors of the atmosphere and all that. They try to analyze the difference between the background and the foreground, the tonalities, the ratios and proportions, the perspective, all these things, the eye level and the related change in their forms. So actually it is a study. When we study from the actualities of whatever is before us. When we come to rendering, in rendering, as I was telling you, our mind goes to the elements of those objects and the forms involved. In this particular space, for example, I am conscious that it is a round disc-like thing. It has a width. The width may be like this, or I may take the width like this also of the lid when it may be in my eye level. The question is, what is after all rendering? Now when we come to rendering, it means we take up the elements from all these objects. We separate them, and after separating them, or what we can say, we break the forms into various elements of the total object or the group. We break them into its various aspects. Each component may be broken from the other. Their interrelationship can be disturbed, and it may be a group of different forms derived from this, and then we try to reassemble them in absolutely a new composition. That is, we want to create some new pattern with the help of those elements that we borrow from the group of objects before us. This is actually what we do in rendering. Now in this particular thing, for example, just to explain, one thing is there, I see there is a plate behind, though of course the plate behind is round thing. It has a wavy edge. Now I may put the two forms, the roundness of it as well as the wavy edges, together or separately. We have a cup. The natural form of the cup before us is like this, along with the handle, But again the cup has a border. Now I can break them. There is a handle. There is a round hollow interior of the cup. There is a border of it. We can break them. We can break it. One piece is like, one component is this, the other component is the border area. Now I can remove it from this, or even I can break this one piece of this elliptical form. I may have one ellipse, a part of the ellipse. I may break it, for example, like this. I can combine it like this. Or I may combine it in another form like this, and maybe it is going like this. Or even it may be like this, and the other part of the component may come over here. That is one form overlapping the other. So there are various ways in which I can interpret them, break them, reassemble them, and I think the various permutations and combinations are there in which they can be reassembled. I cannot prescribe any particular way. It is up to the person concerned who is rendering, how he may conceive, how his imagery may go, how he may try to combine them. But another thing like this, what I want to emphasize is that it is not total freedom, that you can do it in any way. We have to observe the principles of pictorial composition. I think as our students are very well concerned and I think they have already studied this thing, when we talk of the elements or the principles of a pictorial composition, we talk of the balance, we talk of rhythm, we talk of unity, we talk of emphasis, we talk of texture, we talk of color. So these are the various principles as well as the elements of a pictorial composition before us. So when I talk of the particular form is there. The form we use for creating a pattern on the two-dimensional surface, inspired by the three-dimensional object or group of objects before us. This is our limit. An important aspect of it is that there are other parts of the elements, other components of which we call elements of a pictorial composition, like line, like form, like colors, like texture, and space. Now space of course is important, but the space we are exploiting with all these things. Form I am not going to explain further, because form means the form borrowed from the objects that are before us. When we talk of the space means space also being restricted by their outlines, as well as the space left outside that, what we call the negative space. But it is not necessary in rendering to follow exactly the division of space according to what is before us. Because as I told you in the beginning, we have to recreate. So the space also can be managed, can be modified, can be restructured according to our concept of a more attractive, beautiful composition. One of the important elements is texture. Now texture again we should understand, because texture in itself is a quality of a particular surface. But here we may borrow the textural quality from that, and even sometimes we may try to invent and create from our own mind with a modified version of what we see. Only to illustrate, the texture itself has got a great quality of creating a pattern in itself on the two-dimensional surface. to demonstrate only with a few lines. Take for instance, a particular form is created with the simple lines like this. It is a rectangular form. But when I combine it with another rectangular form, rectangular line, straight lines, but in a different pattern. Now without creating two different forms like this and like this, they are two different forms. But simply the use of my lines in a different way, the oblique and the vertical. Now these two, suggestion of these two forms has been created on the paper, flat paper. Likewise, I may also use a different method of using the same lines. Take for example, instead of this, one set of lines, another set of lines. They are closer. Now here the intensity of the tones or tonality of the forms has been changed. They create an effect of the similar tones, same intensity of tone. Here the same lines but used slightly with a difference create a different intensity of the two areas. In the same way, it may be some doodlings without any particular design in mind like this. Now that is the texture. It may be with a low pressure on my hand, I may create another, say, set of lines, very disorderly lines, but the effect of the two is different. Now it is up to me, because I can exploit the same line in 1,001 ways. The question is how I am going to use it in my creation, which I call a creation, I think the result of the rendering. These are, I think, important things. Likewise, the designs on it, if the border has a design, it has some form like this, the red form is there, the white form is there with the border. Now these forms can be broken or taken out of the strip and put elsewhere to create a new pattern. I can take it from here and introduce a border over here with the same pattern, borrowing it from the cup and introducing it in between. Another thing, the group, as it is apparent, has not been arranged putting the objects at random in any way. They have some interrelationship. When we arrange a still life, it is a group. It is not simply a group of disorderly, arranged in a disorderly manner. We are conscious that they have certain forms. We have to maintain a balance. We have to avoid the symmetry, as well as, I think, some also conscious effort to use the space, because I must be conscious of the effect that I am going to create by painting that still life from the objects on my paper. What are how the space has been distributed. Now here I see it is a diagonal composition, not totally diagonal, but I say the top and the edge of it going down the edges of the other objects is oblique. Likewise there it is the straight. So it is something like that. The total group is like this. If I say, now in this space it is arranged like this. So I am conscious of this space also, enclosed within this rectangle. Now this space has to be kept in mind, not necessarily exactly following the same thing, but I have to use the space of my paper in my own way with the help of whatever elementary images are created in my mind inspired by the various components of the various objects of the still life. That is rendering. So that restructuring the group of forms that are existing before me in the still life, that restructuring is actually what we call the rendering of still life. Thank you, and thank you very much.